This is the High Desert Luthiery podcast, interviewing luthier Tobin Shaeffer.
And in each one of those instruments, he just kind of said it was like, whoa, wow. And I'm all, that is the experience. That's the customer experience I'm after. If you have that experience, you should buy that instrument because if you don't, it's
Yeah.
going to haunt you.
Hi, I'm Perry. Welcome to the actual first interview for the High Desert Luthiery podcast. Tobin Shaeffer from the Santa Cruz area will be joining me. He's been making acoustic guitars, some what I consider very unorthodox and fresh designs for many years. We talk about shared experiences, both having worked for Santa Cruz Guitar Company as well as some of his ideas around how acoustic instruments are made or function, or at least how he does it. And it's a fun little interview. First go around, and I hope you enjoy it. Welcome to the High Desert Luthiery podcast. I'm Perry from Unga Guitars and the creator of the High Desert Luthiery Invitational, or as we're calling it now, HDLI for short. The show's going to happen twice a year in celebration of luthiers, luthier adjacent creators, musicians, and the art that comes from putting all this stuff together. The HDLI is a unique event that encourages actual support in the music community by providing free booths to the vendors and free admission to the public. The event includes vendors and musicians that are curated by me to create a cohesive and organized event. The HDLI encourages community and collaboration amongst the artists. This podcast is one way to help us all get to know one another. To learn more about the show and the artists, please visit the website highdesertluthery.com. So today, my good friend Tobin from Santa Cruz, living in Santa Cruz, is joining me today. So why don't you introduce yourself in case I didn't do a very good job?
Oh, no, you did a fantastic job. So I'm Tobin Shaeffer. I'm a luthier that does happen to be living in Santa Cruz. Let's see, I've been working with guitars since 93, I want to say. So, I had some introductions and some travels around and worked with a few different people and had some great mentors along the way and actually even made a couple friends. And yeah, here we are today, getting ready for actually what will be my first independent show come the HDLI 2024.
Yeah, right. So we've been writing all these blogs. So we as Allison and I are running the show, the whole High Desert Luthery thing. So the blog voice is Allison and I kind of conversating over coffee most of the time. But I noticed that at the show that we just had in December, there were vendors that weren't settled on a brand name yet, or didn't have logos or a mixture of both. Where are you at with that?
Well, it's kind of an interesting story, actually. I think it doesn't matter how many years ago it was, but it wasn't that many years ago. I think after probably a decade and a half of really racking my brain about coming up with a name, I happened across one that I thought, wow, this will be pretty cool. And then as I kind of did a little bit of like Googling and whatnot, I kind of had this like gut feeling like I'm not going to get away with this because it's similar to something else that out there exists. And in a previous career, I had an experience with a cease and desist because of, brand name being too similar. So I'd always been a little worried about it. And then, and then sending you the information for this show, I didn't do a very good job of handing across the information. So what came up on the website as my company name is Boutique Laboratory, which I'm really warming up to because
Okay.
it really actually kind of fits more of what I'm really about, I guess, in a lot of ways. And I mean, it's not quite a mouthful as the other one would have been a little bit. And it's almost a little bit easier to explain than the other one was. So because I am a small shop that specializes in, highly specific stuff, which is the boutique part. And the laboratory part is all about test, observe, create, do it all over again, test something new, observe what happens,
Yeah.
or even don't even try just a different wood as a test sometimes, right? And observe and just keep going. It's a process that just never stops. So I think I'm early enough in the stage of where I'm pushing a lot of things that I can actually adapt this change pretty readily. And over the last few days, have really been warming up to it. So it might just be that, like, what the hell is boutique laboratory? Well, if then it's what you're looking for. And also, in reading some of the blogs that you put out recently too, it really fits the some of the core values I have about building instruments. So
Yeah. Yeah, core values is what really drove this event. You putting all this together, it's what's driving this podcast. Yeah, and for anybody that's not following the blogs, we'll put a link to the blog in the show notes for sure, as well as the website. But so the end of this year, I ended up on the bench, got hurt at work, couldn't walk around for quite some time. And so started putting the show together and sort of like in between exhausting Instagram and just getting tired of looking at a computer screen, I would try and sit down and have the patience to watch anything. And I'm just such a busybody. And we watched this short little special on Stoicism, and virtue ethics came up. And it's something that resonated. Basically, you're only in control of what you're in control of. You have influence over, only a certain amount of things. And usually people are thinking along, other ideas. And, influence comes up. You hear it a lot in social media with, social media influencers. But really, like, what are they influencing? It's more of like social media promotion. People might be making decisions on things that they buy based on what these people are using. And I guess you can like say the same for musicians, right? I mean, I
sure.
picked up a Strat because I saw Stevie Ray playing one.
Right. There's actually a great Ezra Klein podcast. I don't get paid by Ezra for promoting his stuff, so Wall Street Journal pays him. But it's a podcast on taste, and there's
Okay.
some really interesting stuff that comes up in about social media and subtle influence, if you will. So I'm not going to go into it because that's not the rabbit hole for this particular podcast. But if people are curious about what you were talking about influencers and stuff, and hear a really interesting take, I think it is appropriate to the conversation, but you do that on your own time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. And, we might even put a link to that show in the notes as well, just to be thorough.
Yeah.
So I see a bunch of guitars behind you. Can you tell me about the types of instruments you're making these days?
Um, yeah. There's a couple of them that the electrics I didn't make.
Okay.
Couple of these things are ones I made probably 20 years ago. Some of the current stuff, that one, and this one directly behind me. Um, but yeah, just kind of delving into, just things over the years of like, what are the problems that you run into in the life cycle of an instrument, and how many of those things can you get out in front of in potential. And I shared a shop with a guy at one point who did a lot of repair work. I don't do as much repair. I mean, obviously, I repair the instruments I make, but I don't really take on a lot of repair projects that I didn't have anything to do with. I quite simply don't have the time for it, and it doesn't spark joy. So, um, but there was a lot of things I saw come across his bench, and then it kind of started me thinking, like, how many of these things can you potentially get out in front of? Like neck resets. Not a big fan of neck resets. So I'm glad that, at least the acoustic guitar community is warmed up to the idea of bolt-on necks. I've got a way that I prefer going about it. So things that are bolt-on is one. Another thing is even though some of the earlier stuff I tried, which was what to do about holes in your soundboard, which from a theory standpoint doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So how to move those out of the way and let the soundboard do its job, and maybe try and increase some of the efficiency.
Preaching to the choir. A lot
Yeah.
of these same ideas I share as well.
Yeah. And then, last thing is kind of moving away from a fixed bridge. The holes in the soundboard isn't so much for the touring working musician, but a bolt-on neck and an adjustable, saddle or, bridge itself. Really, like if you're changing climates, your guitar changes shape, you can adjust your intonation on the fly. You can adjust neck angle on the fly. Somebody steps on your neck and breaks it. I can send a new one. You don't have to send your guitar back, and you're back into your instrument in a week and a half versus sending it home to your luthier who might get it to you in the next 6 months. Sorry, guys. I'm not trying to throw us all under the bus, but we know if you're a one-man shop, it's going to take a minute.
Yeah, definitely. I'm definitely guilty of that as well. And, life happens sometimes, and things get stalled out in the shop. And for absolute transparency, sometimes I take on jobs and I'm really working to not do this where I just don't want to do it, but it's for somebody that I know. And I know there aren't a whole lot of other people that are going to be able to pull it off. And it just comes down to making the time and like really wanting to do it. But this brings up another good point too, with time and how you're using your time. You mentioned that you don't do repairs, and um, so what do you do for work? Like, can you tell us about that?
Well, sure. Yeah, I'm a real estate agent and doing project management as well, which is kind of related to real estate, more on the housing development side. But so that's kind of where the day job goes. It's a highly malleable time thing. Obviously, there are work hours and business hours, but I'm not punching a time clock for anybody else. So when the weather's good and the climate conditions are right, I'll put my phone on in meetings and go out to the wood shop, and my shop's set up to do more batch work, so it's really high efficiency. I mean, I hand do everything, but it's still based on super high efficiency, so that I can go through and rotate. Maybe in a 2-hour process, I'll put linings on 6 or 8 guitars, and that step's done. So the next time I'm out, maybe I'm just out there cutting truss rod slots and neck joint tenons on necks, so that none of these things need to be so sequentially and instantaneously tied together. And I'm not really divorced from the process of being intimate when I'm building these instruments. I'm just raising a whole bunch of kids at one time. And, and there's plenty of family models out there that support this is possible, and they do grow up to be fully functioning and awesome human beings. So
Yeah. In the fight world, I think I would describe this as punches and bunches. And it's a great way to get to know a design.
Absolutely. Yeah. The course correction, want to catch things early.
Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely is something that that you can get really, like, you know what? Say you build one instrument, it takes you 6 months, and you're like, at some point in it, you're all, I don't know how I like how this neck angle works or this headstock angle, let's say. Like, maybe I want to change it by 3 degrees. Well, the next instrument you're going to get to do that on is going to happen in another 6 months. And if you
Right.
took good notes, you still might forget. But it does allow you to go like, all right, I'm going to take these next two and I'm going to shave in or change this by 2 or 3 degrees. And that way, those instruments are next to each other when they're done. And you can go, oh, yeah, this definitely is different or not
Yeah.
different. And I'm just using that as one example. Obviously, with guitars, there's violins, cellos, ukuleles, you name it, the
Yeah.
myriad of things.
Right. So you mentioned climate.
Last couple of years, the weather patterns have sort of changed a little bit, and I wasn't really happy with the ability to control some of the more sensitive stages of build. So I'm an empty nester now, and my son's room was my real estate office, which I use one desk, and that's really all I need because files get stored on digital things and they're about this big. But I realized like I can throw our dehumidifier in here and keep my space similar temperature, similar humidity. So it's a pretty controlled space. And then I have a shop with the tools and all the stuff for bigger, dustier processes. And so that's kind of how I'm kind of rolling it out now.
And you're still in the Santa Cruz area?
I am still in the Santa Cruz area.
Right on, right on. So that brings me to my next question is, having sort of been from the area and definitely, for those of you who don't know, side note, Tobin and I both shared time at the same shop in the Santa Cruz area, not at the same time. Um, so we got a lot of people in common.
A
And
lot of people in common.
Yeah, and we'll just throw it out there. That was the Santa Cruz Guitar Company shop, uh, owned by Richard Hoover, and so many amazingly talented artists, luthiers, people
Oh yeah.
passed through that shop.
Oh man, yeah. Well, I know you worked with Dan.
Yeah,
Yeah, Dan Roberts of Roberts Stringworks. But I think he was in Montana by then, right?
yeah, he was.
Yeah. So super influential guy. Yeah, one of the great things about him was just the thought process on tool design. Um, like he was super good at that and just really great at solving the puzzle, which I like to think was one of my strong suits. But certainly having a guide, somebody who's done it before, was great. And then Roy McAllister was another pretty talented guy. McAllister Guitars, he was there, but he was gone, I think, by the time you got there.
Yeah, oh yeah,
But then you worked with Adam Stark, and he's still just killing it in the Finnish world.
definitely.
Super great guy.
Oh,
um
super talented.
yeah, if you want to know how to streamline your finish work,
Yeah,
reach out to Adam.
yeah, right. He's one of the very few luthiers that I know personally that does both sides, the wood shop and the finish work so well.
Mhm.
I remember one year going to the NAMM show, and it was like he had painted anything cool that was at the NAMM show. Um, it blew my mind, like just stopping by now and then, and seeing what he was working on and who was stopping by the shop to pick up, drop off. Like it was pretty amazing. And also, being that he shared a shop with Rick Turner,
Right.
it was an opportunity to meet a legend,
Yeah.
another legend in the industry. One thing that keeps coming up for me in putting together this show and this podcast and doing the blogs is how grateful I am to have met these legends like Rick Turner, and then I spent a lot of time with Richard Hoover, as you did too. And we wouldn't have our industry without these guys. Richard and Rick really helped spearhead the custom instrument movement, the boutique instrument movement. And
True
very
point.
grateful, and Rick's since passed, and hopefully I could get Richard on the show one of these days, and hopefully out to the next Luthiers show, the next High Desert Luthiery Invitational. That'd be pretty awesome.
That
Um,
would.
yeah, yeah. I was just texting him the other day, and I was like, oh man, I'm texting Richard Hoover. Like, that's so cool.
I ran into him at Ace Hardware a couple weeks back.
That's funny. That's funny. I used to run into Rick at Charlie Hong Kong for lunch every now and then, and
Oh yeah, oh
and I
yeah.
was just like, hey, that's Rick Turner over there. Hey, what's up, Rick?
Yeah, I used to go over and have him resaw wood for me because he's got one of those or hat he well yeah, the shop still has it. And actually I went and visited Adam over there a few weeks ago as well. And yeah, and of course, he's showing me stuff he's working on. He's all, and this one's for so and so, and this one's for so and so, and I'm all, still got it, man.
Life, the life, living the life. Um, and it's so cool because he's not doing this, through repair necessarily, and he's doing all this work for all these amazing artists. And that brings me to my next question is, how do you feel like the culture growing in a luthier rich environment? How do you feel like that influenced your art?
um, that's a good question because um when you frame it that way, the culture, I guess, in the sense of the Luthery rich culture, yeah, probably did have a pretty big influence, at least in the way of like, nobody needs me to build a Martin or Gibson style guitar for them. There's plenty of dudes who do that really well. Go catch those guys. I've got a Tony Rice model dreadnought that I started building in 1994, and it's been sitting here 35 years waiting to get binding put on it.
Wow.
It'll be interesting when I finally play that guitar because it'll be aged really well. But anyway, yeah, so I think that, and working with my brother-in-law, who's a master violin builder, and his dad was a well-renowned bow maker, kind of the influences of, like, there's still a lot of uncharted territory in the acoustic guitar world.
Oh,
Uh,
definitely.
and Dennis and I were kicking around ideas that took me 20 plus years to finally get into something that I'm comfortable with calling a ready to go instrument. But, things that are small and loud, fit little people. And by little people, meaning somebody who's maybe 5.5 feet tall or under. I just watching this one girl one time just wrestling a dreadnought at a
All right.
bluegrass jam bluegrass jam, just trying to keep up with the noise level. So she's got this big giant guitar and this little tiny body, and like, you need something that fits you because you'll enjoy playing more. And so, I mean, it's not obviously a dig against anything. I think it's more of a dig against the the instrument industry not catering to the fact that people are all different shapes and sizes. So there are a lot of different shapes and sizes of guitars. I mean, don't get me wrong, I haven't heard a lot of people outside of you and I, going on endless hours, and Dennis, of course, endless hours of like, gosh, what if we did this, and how do they, like, okay, if we push this way, can you push it that way? And that's so that's where that influenced me. It really, like, encouraged, or at least I noticed that there was room to be different, and um and I felt comfortable about that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's a big thing that we're pushing with this High Desert Luthery thing, is the art of it. How individual it is, how subjective it is. Everything that everyone is doing matters. And there's all of these they choose to call them arguments. It's kind of the way that the language is, it's kind of takes this aggressive stand in social media, in like the argument around tone. You know,
So
it's a fight. Like it's which one's better, which one's the best, and it's so subjective, and like it really devalues the human experience. Because what
uh,
sounds amazing to one person sounds totally different, or like I usually say, like dog shit to another person.
yep, yep.
Yeah, so it's really amazing that you
You don't
found.
have to go any further than the ladder brace argument, right?
Yeah. And I
Um,
always told everyone, well, if it makes a sound, it probably sounds like a guitar. Like, at the end of the
yeah,
day, my ear, even after so many years of doing this, my ear still can't hear so many of the nuances that other people hear.
sure. And but it's the same thing of like, people like, hey, if you're going to be playing in a classical music orchestra, like, yeah, you need to have a good ear because everybody in there has a good ear and everybody listening has a good ear. So it's a good idea to be really good. It's just like
Yeah.
people who can play Flight of the Bumblebee at 220 beats per minute. Like, I can't even hear all those notes. Forget playing that. My fingers don't move that fast. So
Yeah.
there's the physical limitations, but I just to let you know that you're not the only. Like the word tone probably just needs to disappear from the language
Yeah.
because
So what would you
because
replace it with?
well, I mean, where I was going with this is like if you talk about tone in the fitness industry or you talk about tone in the color industry, the argument doesn't go away.
Yeah.
If a word goes away, maybe the argument goes away.
Okay.
But no, as far as what would I use in place of it, I think you capture it pretty well. In that is like if you like it, you'll probably play the instrument and make some really fun music. If you don't like it, you're just giving me money and thank you. But that guitar probably belonged to somebody else.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
now you just paid me to not give it to somebody who really likes it.
Yeah.
And I'm not really interested in that process.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why I have a second job.
And that's another good point too. And I asked you about what you do for work specifically with the point, and that point is so many of us builders, we've got other jobs, we've got full-time jobs. Like I just talked to one of my favorite bass makers, Serene Basses. He's up in Colorado, and he's been making basses like, I don't know, since the late 80s, early 90s. I remember seeing his ads,
Are
and
you talking electric basses or are you
yeah, electric
talking?
basses.
Okay.
And I remember seeing his ads in all the old guitar player magazines, and I've just been aware of him for a really long time. And he told me just this year, so I was talking to him last on New Year's Day, this will be the first time that he's building full time, and blew my mind. And I've been sort of in and out of full time in my shop and doing other things. And I think that's the reality for a lot of people. But it's really interesting to see like the variety of people drawn to instrument making. I think it's a really good thing to share. I think there's a lot of um, resonance in this industry with the artists, making the instruments, in that we're all doing this sort of as a hobby, sometimes as a side gig, but with passion, definitely. I heard you say something earlier that really, speaking of music speak, really resonated with me. You were talking about it's something that comes up in our conversation, and it's how to drive the box a lot better, how to get it to work more efficiently. So you mentioned getting the top to work more efficiently. Is there any material that you're just drawn to to do that job?
Uh, I'm still really a lot of experimentation about that. because again, it always comes down to there's so many factors going into it. It's not just the material of the soundboard. It's not
Yeah.
just the material of the braces. It's, it's the strings. It's, what scale length? Like, I mean, are you kidding me? um, so, the objectives I try and shoot for are I want to put as few braces as I can on a top.
Okay.
Um, and ideally, um, they're more about structure against tension than they are trying to shape the sound.
Okay.
Because like I don't know if you ever look at like a piano soundboard.
Yes, definitely.
They're basically braced to not buckle under the tension of the bass notes for the most part, right?
Right.
I mean, just in like a broad term, and if I'm off on this, I'm totally open to criticism about it. You can at me, I'm fine, because I'll learn something, or and even if it's just that you're a jerk because you criticized me without anything that I could use to better myself.
How dare you not know what you're talking about?
but bring it on. I'm okay. Um, uh, so so there's that aspect of it, and those are the kind of the parameters I sort of try and drive it into. I have 4 basic body shapes that I build, 2 asymmetrical ones and 2 symmetrical ones. The symmetrical ones, really the only difference is one of them's a 14 frets clear of the body and the other one's 12 fret. So with those, obviously I can play around with how I'm refining that a lot easier because there's some symmetry, which is something that again, going back to you asked about culture and how it influenced. I'm not entirely sure that symmetry is the best way to approach soundboard. So I went with an asymmetrical design that is a smaller body and a bigger body. They're roughly the same design, but the center line's offset. So there's less treble side to the soundboard and more bass side to the soundboard.
Sort of mirrors a piano.
In some ways, yeah. I mean, there's obviously like real big differences in how a string is plucked or hammered, depending on how heavy your hand is. No. But yeah, just the idea that longer wavelengths need more medium. You don't have bass speakers that are this big around that are as good as bass speakers this big around, at least in the sense of frequencies they can handle. So, I'm only so many years into playing with this design. Kind of going back to where you said about people building and why they build. I jacked up my elbow and it was in 5 pieces for a while because I didn't have insurance because I didn't have a shop for a time, and I wasn't sure if I was ever going to go back to it until I realized like this isn't something I could never not do. For my own mind and my own soul, I needed to build instruments, whether or not I ever sell any.
I
At
feel
this
the
point,
same way.
At this point, I'm invested into it enough that like I do need to sell some because I can't keep them here. I'm going to run out of space. But it's just that needing to be involved in it. So that I've been messing around with that design for probably about 6 or 8 years now. And so far the feedback's pretty good.
Cool, man. Very cool.
You'll
And
get
so,
to see him at the show.
yeah, definitely. And yeah, that you just hit the nail on the head. Tobin's going to be showing his work at the next High Desert Luthiery Invitational June 2nd here in Albuquerque. I'm super excited about that. And I think one of the advantage to putting a show together like this is I get to invite my friends, and some of them take me up on that offer. So where do you see yourself and your work in 2 years?
Largely that it's just known more, that
Okay.
it's not just my circle of people. Not that I have like a tiny circle of people, but just these instruments are out there and an option for folks. because there's definitely a couple of them that are options that really aren't available. Not very many people are making, certain parameters. And I'd like to fill in some of those needs. So I think that's largely where I see it, is just being known. I mean, there's having that philosophy of like, if you don't like it, don't buy it. I'm not expecting to set sales records on anything. I'm not giving these instruments away.
Right.
But at the same time, I'm also kind of exploring, some material options, laminate, maybe slap together 5 or 10 laminated instruments, or if you've ever run across Tim Sway, freaking door plywood really makes reasonable student instruments.
Oh, wow.
But to make a handful of those and donate them to local music schools, do them for giveaways or support school music programs.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily all about me. There's a lot of need out there that can be met. And if I can contribute to meeting some of that need that I don't necessarily see a ton of big industry people, put a grand effort into. Not saying they don't, because they do. Certainly, there's an instrument I got here from Epiphone, helping out a music school and a drawing that they did. So I was the benefactor of buying tickets.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah. So we do Unga, my company. We do raffle guitar at every show. If you wanted to bring a raffle guitar, if you are able to get something together, by the
Oh
show,
yeah, I'd be happy to do that. So
be a great way to get an instrument out into the world, another one, right?
absolutely, I'm actually getting ready to start a batch of those said instruments. So
Awesome.
I'll plan on keeping one aside.
Yeah, that's really
I
exciting.
might even ship it down to you early so you can promote it.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, you could just send us pictures,
Oh, come
and
on, you want to play it?
I
You
do.
want to play
I do. I do.
it.
Yeah, this show, doing the show, like I'm a player. I think I played more before we moved out to New Mexico about like maybe 6 years ago or so. And I haven't really played since we've been out here. And doing this show has really got me wanting to play a lot more, which is pretty cool. It's pretty fun. Yeah. So are there any sorts of artists like we've kind of touched on functionality of the instrument. We've kind of made the link between like a piano and guitar, and the way that I experience that link is like getting these players, like I think Tuck Andrus is a really good example of somebody that can get these grand piano like tones out of a 6-string guitar.
Tone.
Right? Like, so I think of players like that when I think of your instruments. I don't know how you feel about that, but are there any sorts of artists that you're looking to work with?
Couple things. I don't build custom.
Okay.
With one caveat. Somebody asked me to build a style of instrument, and all he said is like, I just want an acoustic version of this type of electric guitar. And so I took that on. The very first prototype that I did, he had a buddy of his play it, and they sent me a video, and the guy was playing slide on it, and I was blown away. I was blown away. Wasn't expecting that instrument to be played that way for what it was. And I'll talk more about this. Is more like an unveiling. Your show is going to be the unveiling for this instrument for the most part. So that's why I'm not going into details about it. So if you want to know about it, show up to the invitational, because I'm gonna, do the old pull the drink off of the proto car. I'll be dead honest with you. I would love to get one in the lap of Paul Gilbert and have him do his little slide, and that guy's a maniac. The closest I get is I get to follow him on Instagram, right?
Yeah.
Um, but he definitely seems like the kind of person that, would love to say, hey, just play it for me. I just want to hear what
it sounds like.
Right? I know what it sounds like. I want to hear what this instrument makes your brain think.
Oh.
And that's kind of the objective behind any of the instruments that I build is like, what does this make your brain think?
Okay.
This little guy up here. So this is the large body, not symmetrical instrument. But a lot of people's first impression of that thing is like, oh my gosh, that thing's huge. I mean, the good news is when it's in your lap, it doesn't feel that big. It actually feels considerably smaller than what it is. So I'm afforded a ton of soundboard space without the ergonomics of a giant instrument.
Right.
And what I've noticed is that it opens up that creativity of like, wait a minute, like, what about this? And what about, and like the what if, you almost see the what ifs start happening, and then you start hearing them. So yeah, artists like that. So yeah, Paul Gilbert on the slide. I think Andy Kay would be an interesting guy to have play around with something from more of a finger style standpoint. But yeah, I mean, there's countless others, right? All the Guitar Hero guys. An experience I had since we brought up the Santa Cruz Guitar Company is Jeff Pivar, David Crosby's guitar player, and probably the single most influential experience about like deciding to not do custom builds. He was in the setup room and asked about playing the guitars that were getting ready to be shipped. And he went through and he picked up like every single guitar that was ready to get shipped. But there was like 2, maybe 3 of them that dude disappeared from existence for about 10 minutes while he just played some crazy stuff. And in each one of those instruments, he just kind of said it was like, whoa, wow. And I'm all, that is the experience. That's the customer experience I'm after.
Yeah.
That right there is like, if you have that experience, you should buy that instrument, because if you don't, it's going to haunt you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And,
we'll work out terms if we have to, but don't go to sleep missing that instrument.
Yeah. I think, one of the big advantages to working in a production shop like SCGC is being able to experience that fairly frequently. That oh shit moment, like this is unreal. And you mentioned your Tony Rice model that's unfinished, and I feel like that was one of the guitars that almost always had that appeal. That was one of the models there, and it wasn't meant to work for everybody. Like it was meant to work for Tony.
Mm-hmm.
The recipe, we were just talking about, kind of like what goes into designing an instrument, and Richard and Tony really nailed that. They really nailed it. I can't think of a single one that was just like, like next. We all really enjoyed taking the time to listen to that model being played.
The Bob Brosnan baritone was kind of along those lines too.
Yeah. There's an interesting character. Leave it at that.
Like we got room to talk.
Oh my God. Yeah, you touched on some great things that I learned at that shop. And did you ever get to work with Janice Ian?
Not directly.
Okay.
Not directly.
I had the opportunity to work with her and really talk to her about what she was looking for, and her instrument was really, really interesting. She's a little thing, and
perfect example of that. Yeah. Like, I need something that fits me, but people can hear me playing.
Yeah. That's the nice way of putting it. Janice has a great sense of humor though, and she would come in and bust everyone's chops. And she came in one day, and I was getting ready to work on like a new version of her model, and she tells me, you know, Perry, um, I need it to feel the same, but most importantly, I need to be able to fit my boob in it. And if you can't pull this off, it's not going to work.
Yeah, yeah, that's another thing on these too is I have I think it's a 5 foot radius arc on the backs.
Oh, okay.
It's a linear arc. So it does not fit flat against your body.
Yeah.
Um so yeah, if if you're uh if you're a fella with a Bella, you can roll it on that.
That's cool.
Or if you're a lady that looks ladyish, yeah, don't have to go, where do I put this thing?
Right. Yeah, you can roll it and find a comfortable spot.
Oh, and an arm bevel, but not your standard arm bevel.
Oh, so how so? What do you mean?
I don't cut a 45-degree angle piece, even though not everybody does the arm bevel that way. But what I do is I do put the bevel support in on the sides, and I put the round over, but then the edge of the soundboard, I'll scrape it down to a bit thinner, and then just kind of glue that down over the round over, so the soundboard becomes
Continue.
the bevel, so you don't get the break and all that extra step stuff. Now,
Yeah.
of course, like, retops are less fun because of
Yeah.
that. And the binding is a tricky thing. Um, but ultimately, I really like the look of it because you don't see it. And there's been a couple people who've played a few of them. They're like, so how does it feel? Like, oh, man, this thing's really comfortable. And they don't know why. And I'm like, oh, well, look at the back. And then did you notice the arm bevel? And I go, no, I didn't even see it. So,
That's awesome. So is there
Easter eggs, if you will.
is there anywhere where we can go to follow your work? How do you share your work on the regular, like on the socials or anything like that?
Um, honestly, I don't a whole lot at this point. And not for any real specific reason other than I'm still sort of like, chewing off a little more than than I need to be.
Okay.
Um, and so setting up a camera and setting up all this stuff, the film processes and the shop and whatnot, it's just not where I'm at right now. I've got a friend of mine who's really good at marketing and media, who's going to handle getting the website up and going. I got to get an instrument up to him so that he can do some imaging and some things off of that. So the promotional side, really, I'm like doing this as kind of all precursor stuff. I've kind of got everything geared towards, more promotion as the show gets closer, and then beyond that, it's sort of a if you can't be consistent about it, don't start. I'm not at a spot where I can be real consistent about it at the moment.
Yeah,
So
for
I'm,
a lot of us, I think we feel the same way. Um, especially people who are around before internet, before cell phones, where you just did stuff and you did it for your own sake.
yeah,
And I definitely go back and forth with prioritizing my own experience, and instead of prioritizing social media. And I try to be fairly consistent. Although this being injured the past 2 years at the end of the year it's really kind of slowed me down and loosened up my attitude around things. Where it's like I'm going to post content when I can post content, and nobody wants to see this busted leg. or me falling down, just for the sake of content. So,
Yeah.
it kind of is what it is. And I think it's a very good thing to talk about, in that a lot of people think that there is a way to do things, and there's many ways to do things. And
Right.
we've got builders participating with no websites, no socials, just
Hmm.
and making room for that
Right.
uh, is what this is all about.
Yeah. And, if I was to throw out any advice, which, maybe I'm not qualified for, um, I would offer up that if you're going to pursue promoting your instruments, do it in a way that doesn't detract from your enjoyment of what it is you're trying to do.
All right.
Um, I mean, like I would prefer to have high quality pictures up, whether it's hiring a photographer to come out to the shop and shoot video, take pictures while I go through quote unquote steps of the process for a day and then dole those out over time. That would be just my preference.
Okay.
But that's because at some point, again, I'm not giving these guitars away. So if I'm gonna ask of like your article on what you charge for your art, if I'm gonna ask what I'm asking for my art, I'm prepared to take the step to present it in an artful way. iPhones are great. Their cameras are so much better and you can grab all these little free apps to adjust color and this, that, and the other thing. But a professional photographer has an eye.
Yeah.
It's use their art to emphasize your art. It's just stay in your lane kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and sometimes it's your friend who's a photographer who's trying to promote their business. And they're like, oh, I'm so stuck in a can of like everybody just expects like, oh, you can just come shoot pictures of us on the, of me and my significant other. And so, and then it's like, I want to take different pictures. So like, get your other artist friends to take photos and you promote them while they promote you.
Yeah.
And
What a great point.
and bring that kind of stuff. Or if people, like participate in blogging and things like that. But just the point is that if you're trying to get outside of your lane, you'll lose focus on what you're trying to do, and that's build.
Yeah.
Whether it's instruments or maybe I'm not clear on what luthier adjacent all is, but
Yeah,
but
the new term. Yeah. Yeah. So we
but
have, go ahead, finish your thought.
anyways, it's just that like I'll, you know, have the consciousness around or the intent around supporting your lane, and get that dialed. Because
Yeah.
if that's what drives you and that's what brings you joy, and spend as much time in that lane as possible, and let other people do the stuff that kind of makes you go.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very on point. I just had a realization in listening to that, to what you just said. I feel like photographers and videographers really fall into the luthier adjacent category, where at times we rely on these artists to help us get our product out to the world. But luthier adjacent is essentially everybody that's involved with the industry, everybody that's in between the builder and the player. So that could be the company that's making your hardware, that could be the amplifier company that you choose to use, the guy making your cables, the everything involved. And a big goal of mine is to have some of these craftspeople and companies involved with the show. It's a huge goal of mine. And we got a lot of no's from all these companies for this second show that we're doing, and I wasn't surprised.
Mhm.
Um, and we'll see if we ever have room for them. Because the filling the event with like-minded artists is first and foremost. but luthier adjacent, that's, just touching on that a bit. And definitely looking for photographers and videographers to get involved for this event. And kind of knowing, the players you have in mind for putting your instruments to the test. We're going to be curating a selection of players, local players, to come out and do some demos, and give all the builders the opportunity for those photo moments, those video moments, and also help spread the word about what you do.
Cool.
Yeah, yeah. So I feel like this is a good time to wrap it up. Thanks for joining me, Tobin. This is the first show, and I think it's wonderful to have a friend, help me through this. And I really look forward to seeing your work at this show and seeing you again. It's been years.
Yeah, since the in person. Yeah.
Long overdue for a hug.
Yeah. No, we last couple of years we've been going down to Morro Bay on a regular basis for a work related scenario, and just every time going through the town I met you in, I'm all, oh, that's where Perry lived. That's where Perry lived. That's where Perry lived. Every time I'm driving back home, it's like I couldn't not do it. On the way down, I'm focused. I'm all, gotta get there. But on the way home, it was always like, because it was just right there. I was on that side of the road, and north on 101. So I miss you, friend. I'm still glad that we do have some really great phone conversations, and I've always been grateful for being introduced to you. I think there's a lot of the things that I feel free and comfortable about the journey I've embarked on going away from traditional acoustic guitars. I don't have any problem saying that you've been really helpful and pardon the pun, instrumental in feeling comfortable in that space. Your encouragement has always been just absolutely phenomenal. So I appreciate you as a builder and dearly appreciate you as a friend. And I'm very happy to do this show with you. And don't hesitate to reach out.
Awesome, Tobin. I really appreciate that. I feel the same way about you. And having someone to talk to about crazy ideas I've kind of categorized it as unorthodox builds. It's just so helpful. Those conversations of, hey, I got this crazy idea, check this out. Having my coworkers, well, I got you on my earpiece. What the hell is he talking about? It's those are great moments, but it's really nice to have somebody to listen and give feedback, and that reassurance that I'm not insane. That might be a good idea. It's so helpful.
I always thought I reassured you that you are insane, but it is a good idea.
Yeah. Maybe you need to have a little more rosé before you finish that thought. And it's this is a morning interview, so there's definitely no rosé involved, but maybe next time. And that brings me to my next point. If you have something you want to share with us, any ideas, any new builds, definitely let me know, and we'll get another podcast going. This is going to keep on going throughout until the show, and afterwards.
I've actually got two youngsters that are learning how to build right now with me.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's more of in the spirit of what you're doing is like, hey, none of us are going to be able to sell our art if everybody's stuck going trying to peek over the top of a Ibanez logo or a Martin logo, or
right.
Dare I say, even an SCGC logo. There's tons of really talented people, really passionate people. Hey, if you're shopping for a new instrument and you don't want to go to Guitar Showcase, hey, guess what? Hold on for another 4 months, because all these heads that make killer custom stuff or individually made, handmade stuff, whatever, custom or not custom, traditional or unorthodox, that you could go there and pick these things up and try them out, and get the word out more. I think it's very indicative of where like hustle economy is kind of going, that nobody's going to promote us. And if you're trying to get out on the big channels, your chances of getting there are next to nothing. Some people I know were kind of pushing me like, oh, why are you trying to sell like 10, 20 instruments a year for this amount versus 20,000 a year for this amount, And I'm like, there's some details behind it. And over the course of my life, I've met some people who actually could make that happen. And I was talking to the guy who's going to be doing my marketing, and he's like, oh yeah, I'm actually in like a mastermind group with this guy, and he worked at Gibson, and I ran this idea by him. And like the thing that he brought up that immediately made me go, no, this isn't going to work, is the materials aspect, that these big companies are buying up all of the materials that are standard builds. And in doing so, you like right there, it's going to be, even if you had the backing to, be able to have everything factory made overseas, which, is really not what I'm about. But, I'd like to go on vacation too. That the barrier to entry into that level just isn't there. So
it's not very realistic at all.
Yeah. So the sooner I think all of us, passion builders realize that, then, we stop it and we just start setting up local avenues. Just like there's ways to like start kind of fighting for space in there of like, you don't have to go to Guitar Center to find an instrument, or you're not
read my last article, Tobin.
I read all of them, Perry.
Thank you. Yeah, you're really touching on something that that this same conversation came up with a student of mine, and it's I think this is going to be the way of the future. I think it's so hard to find representation in music stores, which are the obvious place to sell instruments. The not so obvious would be possibly art galleries that are willing to take a risk.
Sure.
But if we band together and curate the luthiers involved, the companies involved for an experience where we know, like, and trust each other, build that community. I think this could be a great way to move forward. In a way, it turns into like a really refined artisans market, very niche. It also really helps the public understand more about what we do. I really appreciate you having you today. And when you get your website up or you get any sort of socials up, let me know and we will add them into the links for this episode. And I'll let you know when we get this posted up. But have a great rest of your day. And I look forward to having you at the next High Desert Luthiery Invitational in June.
June 2nd, 2024, baby.
All right. Take care, Tobin.
All right. Have a good one.